So I plan to introduce everyone, but maybe since we have like what a couple listeners and we know each other, so what if we do like everyone will introduce like I can introduce myself, you will introduce and share some insights from this year, what you do, maybe what interesting courses you taught, and we will slowly move on, you know? So okay, if you don't mind, I will start. Um, so my name is Savenkova. I've been teaching Russian for the last 15 years, and it's my first year as a PhD student here in the US. Yeah. So I'm about to finish my first year and I'm very excited about it because I'm like my students, I'm waiting for the spring for the spring, no, for the summer break. For vacation because I've never been so excited, I think, for the last 10 years. Because I know Sasha, I read your post about teaching in Middlebury. Congratulations. And it's my first summer when I'm not teaching in
I
Middlebury.
know, I was so excited to do that.
So yeah, I'm very excited about my first summer for the last 10 years when I do not teach anything at all. I it's maybe it's bad saying like that at the conference, but I hope I will recharge and prepare myself for the next semester. And in the fall, I will join UMD Russian program, and I will be teaching Russian there as well. Okay, so Sasha, can you go next?
Yes, sure. My name is Alexandra Shapiro. I am a senior lecturer at the University of Georgia, the Russian flagship program. I've been generally teaching languages for about 20 plus years now, and I've been teaching Russian for, I believe, 8 or 9, something like that. I taught at Penn State, and I've been teaching Russian here for the flagship program for the past 6.5 years. I, like Isa mentioned, will be teaching at Middlebury. I also co-run the study abroad program in Armenia and Georgia. And last year was our inaugural year where 12 of our students went and had an amazing time in Armenia and Georgia. So did I. Fun courses that I teach. I've been teaching this modular course for the advanced students of Russian, kind of a capstone, more or less, course for our advanced students. And the topics there are media literacy, journalism, and human rights and protest art. So lots of fun stuff. And in the fall, I'm looking forward to teaching a course on ultra contemporary culture in Russia and the Russian speaking world, with an emphasis on taboo language. Just because talking to my students, I realized they don't really know it beyond the couple of obvious words, and then they don't actually know how to use them, and that there might be a positive connotation and that there might be a negative connotation, and that it really plays a very important role in a lot of art and other really interesting contemporary issues. So I'm very excited about that.
Um, okay, I'm not muted. Lauren, can I pass it to you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Lauren Nelson, and I teach Russian at a high school in Chicago, Illinois. And the kind of fun fact that I use for me is that I have over 161 students this year, and I teach 6 sections of Russian one. So I really get to I really get to refine that lesson by the sixth class. The first one's kind of a test run, and then that sixth group gets the best version of it. I've been teaching for 11 years. And so that means I've taught thousands of high schoolers over the years, and I hope to share some insight about what it's like to teach high schoolers in 2025 today.
Great. And Wendy?
Hi, good morning from Alaska. My name is Wendy, Wendy Martelle. I have been at the University of Alaska Fairbanks for a good 12 years. I started teaching Russian, oh gosh, over 20, this is a bit of a long story, but over 20 years ago was my first experience teaching Russian when I was at the University of Pittsburgh as a graduate student. And I taught Russian for a couple years there. And then I moved to Alaska where I didn't teach Russian initially. But now for the last 5 years, I've been tasked with teaching beginning the first and second year Russian. So I'm also in the linguistics program, so I teach both Russian and linguistics classes. And Alexandra, I want to take your class on taboo language, by the way. It sounds amazing.
We'll find out, but it should be fun.
No, it sounds very interesting. Actually, I will be talking a little bit about taboo words in my presentation as well. So I think it's very relevant and I'm intrigued too. So share your insights after you finish teaching the course or maybe while you teach something.
That's
Okay,
the
I
plan at
think
Capstone.
okay, I think we have more listeners joined us, so we can start with our first presenter, Alexandra Shapiro. Floor is yours. You can share the screen if you use the slides.
I do have slides and also the website that I'm going to be talking about, but give me a second. And sorry, so many things open at the same time. Here we go. So today I'd like to talk about a project that we actually did outside the classroom with some of my honors students. This was a student-created website highlighting culture of the Russian-speaking world outside the Russian Federation. And so what were the goals? To, first of all, have our students interact with Russian-speaking culture outside of the classroom, because, you know, it's always a struggle to fit it in. And I had a lot of students who were interested in doing something for their honors option. And this was one of my ways of interacting with honors students. Today, I want to speak about our goals, the process, the sources that we use, the outcomes, and our future directions. The idea came from my colleagues, co-presenters at the ATSIL conference in 2022. Rachel Stauffer, Michael White, and Reagan Flowing spoke about a project that they did with K-16 collaboration. And I got really inspired about using students. They did it in the classroom, but it was a project in one of the classrooms where it was a collaboration between their honors students and K-16 students. And I thought it was a great idea to bridge the gap between K-12 education and university students, engage both, and then kind of try and fill in some of the gaps in Russian language studies, Russian culture studies. So we wanted to educate people on regions of the Russian-speaking world that people might not know that much about. Obviously, our students know a little bit more about Armenia and Georgia now that they go there, but I don't think they did before they went there. We also wanted to spread awareness to the other Russian-speaking countries, aiming to break the stigma that Russian-speaking speakers are all from Moscow. We all deal with the fact that our textbooks mostly speak about Moscow and St. Petersburg and maybe mention Baikal, but that's kind of it. And our students these days go to all sorts of countries in Central Asia, in the Caucasus, in the Baltics. And both our students and their parents actually need to know about these countries to feel safe and excited to go there and study the Russian language immersively. And we wanted to provide an opportunity of collaboration between undergraduate and high school students. So what did we do? We had 2 semesters to finish the project. And by finish, I don't mean actually finish, because it's something that we can be working on for years and years to come. We needed volunteers. So that was the first step for the students to volunteer. Then they needed to pick a Russian-speaking country that is not Russia to work on. Then because last year I had a lot of students, I had 10 students participating, we decided to pair them up. And then they created an outline of the page of each of their countries' pages. What were the topics that they wanted to cover? And then there were drafts. The first drafts were in English because the website is both in English and in Russian. The first step was to create the material in English. And those were usually very brief paragraphs on a certain topic that they would submit every 2 to 3 weeks. First, they would submit it to their partner, and then after that to me. So I was kind of the second layer of editing and going through it. And then after that, they needed to submit the final draft with their sources and photos, once again with sources, onto our Teams page. And then one of the students who was responsible for the website would post it once I approve it. In the spring semester, the students needed to translate the paragraphs that they already did and then add new information if they could. And then most importantly, they paired up with Russian learners from Alberton High School in Georgia. Since we're in Georgia, those were our closest friends. And what they needed to do was talk to their younglings and decide what were the topics that they were interested in highlighting. And those needed to be an even shorter paragraph. So it could be something very specific, like a sports game that is played in that country, or a holiday that is celebrated there, or a musical instrument, or some kind of object that they wanted to highlight, something that was relevant to the culture of the country in question. And then the high school students wrote up the English version, and then together with my students, they worked on translating it because, you know, the level for high school students varies. And so my students were the ones helping them translate. What were the countries that we highlighted so far? We have some information on Estonia, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Georgia, and then we also had a project. Someone did their research presentation on Russian-speaking diasporas in the US, and we decided to include that onto the website because that is very interesting information. I asked the students what information they used in creating their materials, and these were their answers. They used Yandex to translate and DeepL to translate. Mostly they use primarily English sources, right, like Britannica, history websites, some Russian websites for current events, and they made sure that those are independent sources. They use educational English sources, tourist sites, and some sources from the target country. The thing that surprised me was that they actually did not use AI. I don't know if that'll change in the next few years now that maybe we're a little bit more comfortable and trust AI a little bit more, but I was delighted to hear that they did not use it at the time. What were our challenges? Of course, mostly it's keeping oneself on track. This is something that they did outside the class time, so I did have to kind of bug them, even though we had an overall schedule, but not everybody stuck to it. And unfortunately, I did have to send out reminders all the time and kind of bug them about it. It would have been great to have an additional set of eyes because it was just me and 10 students, and that is a lot of editing to do, and just generally having someone who could look maybe at the final version of the website again, because, you know, I can miss things. It was nice to be able to brainstorm on the one hand, but I think it would have been nice to have more of that. Some of the students didn't have a partner, and so for them, that brainstorming was an issue, and I feel like sometimes they didn't think of coming to me to do that. And then, of course, there's the issue of covering more material within every country. The material is kind of unlimited, as you can imagine. So that's why I think that this could be a multi-year project. And so far, we've been doing this for 3 years. It is very time consuming for both students and myself. So I don't know how long we'll be able to keep that going without additional help, but it's definitely been very rewarding. What are some of the things that we mentioned, that the students mentioned for themselves as outcomes. They partially created a website that can be shared with high school students and colleagues at the post-secondary level. They familiarized themselves with a new country. They deepened the knowledge of a familiar region. For some of them, those were the countries that they actually went to, so those pages are a little bit more personal. They strengthened their research and writing skills. Improved their translation skills. Some improved website development and design skills, and group leadership and collaboration and presentational practice. Training on how to find quality sufficient number of and where to upload photos for the website developer. And they developed one's understanding of the current political situation and helped participate in current political debates about the region. The other one that they didn't mention, but actually mentioned in personal conversations, was that it was a pleasure to work with the high school students, and it helped them develop patience and some guiding skills. I definitely noticed that some of my students had to do quite a bit of editing, and they had to give their partners conversations on what is propaganda and what is not, and how to write up this information without it sounding like we are trying to sell the country to everyone. Oh, there we go. So let me see. Right. So these are the two things that the high school students mentioned: more knowledge about different Russian-speaking areas in their culture, and they learned how to communicate better with others, which was great. Our plans are to continue growing, adding short videos and cultural aspects from people who live in those countries. That actually has been another struggle. We do have quite a bit of contacts from students not students, host families from the countries where my students stayed at, but getting the videos has been a struggle. They originally get excited about the idea, but then it never happens, unfortunately. We would like to add exercises to our materials to kind of help them practice these cultural questions, and also strengthen relations with Alberton and other schools. It could be high schools, it could be other universities who are interested in collaborating on this project. So this would be great to do. And then I wanted to very quickly just show what the website looks like now that we're in the online format. So this is our front page. These are the countries that we've covered so far. And we have these links to the countries that we worked on. And let me just quickly scroll through one of the countries. Let's say Belarus is pretty well developed. So this is what it looks like. We have pictures, we have geography, topography. We talk about different areas, climate, and some interesting facts. And as you can see, some of the parts are still in development: history, society, culture, all of that. And then here we feature what our high school students wrote. I believe this is it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alexandra. We can now ask questions. Please ask questions if you have any. Yes, Wendy.
Yeah, I love this project. I think so. I noted in the chat it's a great example of task-based learning, and also like the near-peer mentoring with the high school students and community outreach. And there's so many amazing things that are combined. Just out of curiosity, as part of the website design, did the students have a part in actual, like what the website will look like how, like which colors to use? And oh, okay, great, yeah.
Absolutely. Everything is
Yeah.
done by the students. I only try to come in and make sure that everything is written correctly, which I'm totally failing at because I see typos all the time. Every time I come in, I see something. But yeah, it was mostly linguistic guidance on my end. And sometimes if I notice that something is like not culturally sensitive or correct, I might guide them towards editing. But generally, everything is created by the students. They pick the pictures, they pick the font. I had very little input on this. I will absolutely share the link in the chat in just a second.
Alexandra, I will use the opportunity, this pause, to ask a question. So you mentioned that you're not sure about the future of the project because of the additional help you would appreciate, yeah? So what exactly you meant by that? So do you need like IT help to continue maintaining the website, or yeah, what's the main difficulty?
It would be great to just be able to collaborate with other universities and other students because the desire to create this really depends on the students. And so some years I have the capacity to work with many students. This year, for example, I didn't even advertise it. And so I only had 2 students from the previous years who just wanted to keep on doing this. So I think if there are other universities that would like to try this, we could just turn it into a communal project and give access to other universities and other students to keep on working on this. And then we could just cover more material altogether. So if anyone is interested in doing something similar with their students, they don't need to create a website of their own. We can just keep on working on this one. And once our paid subscription runs out, we could just move it to the free option once again. It's we're using Wix for it. So we start out with a free version, then we upgrade it just to be able to put in more of those pins because they only give you, I think, 4. But we can always switch back to the free version and just keep on adding material there.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. But
also,
you
if
will,
anybody
yeah.
wants to suggest names, the name for the website, we would really appreciate that because our original version was World of Russian, which, you know, sounds a little problematic. We tried ARCs, a term that I heard from a colleague in one of the teacher lounges at ACTR. So areas where Russian is commonly spoken, but that didn't work for the website name because it was already taken. So if anybody has ideas on what to call our website, I'm all ears.
And we have one question in the chat about the level of Russian of your students.
That is a great question. So I think most of the students who joined the first year, those were actually advanced level students. They were, I would say, at least advanced low, maybe even advanced mid. In the second year, when I had 10 students, they were a very mixed group. They were anywhere from intermediate mid to advanced low. And so the way we try to pair them was with, you know, one slightly more advanced student with an intermediate level student. And I think it was more of a struggle for the intermediate level students to translate, and those were the ones who used more of the translation services. But I've got to say the results were quite good for all of them, and maybe there was a little bit more editing on my end for the students who were intermediate mid, intermediate high.
Thank you. Any other questions? But if you think that you might have...
Yeah, there is one more question. Did they speak Russian to each other during the process?
Oh.
I would suspect not. I don't know, but especially because the preliminary work is done in English, I would suspect that they don't. You know, this was more of a cultural project for me, and just the fact that they had to do the translation later on was kind of good enough for me. Thank you so much for all the questions.
Thank you for your presentation. And we can give a floor to the next presenter, Wendy.
Hello, let me time myself here. Make sure I don't go over. All right. I will be talking about, so my topic is reading circles in second year Russian and how they are an inclusive practice. So very quickly, I'm going to describe reading circles very briefly, where I got the inspiration from, what my implementation in a second year classroom looked like, and I'll reflect on some of the things that I've learned from the process. So I'm using the term reading circles. I was inspired by the literature on literature circles or book clubs, where so Harvey Daniels, he's offered a lot of literature on this particular process, and there are like 11 key elements, but I'm only highlighting a couple here. The idea of student choice and responsibility. So it's very important for the students to choose the text that they're going to read. And additionally, students have the responsibility to prepare for each discussion typically through some sort of assigned role. And I'll talk about what the roles could look like. The instructor acts as a facilitator, does not take part in the discussions per se, but more like kind of guides the discussion to ensure that everyone is participating. So I mentioned roles. So here are a few roles listed by Daniels. So the idea is that each student will read the text or a portion of the text, whatever is assigned, and they read the text from this particular role's perspective. So someone who's a connector, they may read the text and thinking about connections that they're making between maybe another text that they read, or a connection to their own life, or connection to another class that they've taken. A word wizard is someone who will identify vocabulary, maybe new vocabulary or really important vocabulary for understanding the text. So after they read the text from this role's perspective, they'll prepare notes and then share what they learn in a whole group class discussion. And then with each reading, like whatever excerpt that you read next, then you can rotate roles. So one class, a student may be a word wizard, and then for the next reading, they might become a connector, and then a questioner, etc. So the implementation that I ended up doing this at the very end of second year. It was like our culminating activity, spring semester, very end, like right around now. I teach Russian online synchronously through Zoom. And with this particular group, there were 9 students, and they overwhelmingly wanted to read an excerpt from The Master and Margarita. We had talked about it earlier in the semester, and they're like, oh, that sounds like a really, really cool story. We want to read more about it. And so I identified, okay, here are a few scenes. We're not going to read the whole book, but here are a few scenes that we can read about. And they were all really interested in reading about when the Master and Margarita first met, when she was carrying the yellow flowers. And then they each chose a role. So I'm going to show you the roles, and I would really welcome feedback on my translation of the roles, because I'm not quite sure which would be. Russian is not my first language. So пересказчик, so like a summarizer, someone who provided a summary of the text in their own words, the main ideas of the text. And then I translated literally, like word wizard, волшебник слова, so someone who finds new words, the most important words, useful words for understanding the text, and explain what they mean. Grammar detective, any kind of grammar questions that they had, or something interesting grammatically that they wanted to highlight in the conversation. Then we had a researcher, and this is a very open-ended kind of role, where they found information, any kind of information connected with the text at all, and share it. And then I had a geographer for this particular scene, so it took place on Tverskaya Ulitsa. And so where does it take place? What did this place look like when Bulgakov was writing The Master and Margarita? What does it look like now? And then an artist to represent the scene through either a drawing or a collection of images. And so I wanted to share what what some of the students did. This was, again, an end of second year. The proficiency levels were mixed in this group. So here our word wizard shared like a glossary, and I gave them guidance. They could either find Russian synonyms, try to explain it in Russian, or they can use English translations. That was fine. This student chose to use Russian to try to explain what some of these words meant. The highlighted in yellow, I highlighted these because there were two word wizards for this iteration, and these are the words that they both picked. So they did this independently. So these were words that they both found interesting. Our grammar detective really highlighted the cases, was really interesting in how the case system was represented in the text. We did a lot of color coding throughout the semester. So this was how they represented the cases, how the cases come alive in a real authentic text. And then here we had a really interesting moment with the researcher and also the artist. So the researcher chose, they keyed in on the word yellow and what yellow can mean, what it can be associated with, and then the artist, this was a drawing. I think they used an app to create this. To create this representation, and they focused on, oh yeah, and then there was actually a mini conversation between the two of them. They had, oh yeah, and then you have the like even number of flowers versus odd number of flowers, and so there was a little bit of some cultural information that they both shared as part of the conversation. Our geographer found some images from Tverskaya Ulitsa back almost 100 years ago, and they also shared, I think if memory serves, these videos. One is an actual video from that time, just screenshots from Tverskaya Ulitsa, and then the other shows what it looks like now currently. So. From this experience, this took about a week and a half. We read about a page of the text. It took a good like 2 full class periods, maybe two and a little bit more. And I think reading circles have a lot of potential as being a student-centered, inclusive practice. It does ensure full student participation, and one of the key phrases that Daniels uses is voice and choice. So the students choose the text, and they also each bring a voice to the conversation through those roles. They also create the learning materials in essence. So based on each of these roles, we have a mini glossary. We have some grammar. We have some grammar instruction. We have some like cultural knowledge that's represented as well. So the students essentially create the learning materials for that lesson, for that unit. I find that the roles, and you can add more. Like it's very flexible. You don't have to stick to like certain kinds of roles. You can add as many as you like depending on the text. And I find that they reflect not only multiple perspectives, but also skills. So, in one role, you might be developing analytical skills versus summarizing skills versus artistic skills versus researching skills, and they're all equally valued as part of the conversation. They have a lot of potential to facilitate intercultural explorations as well as deepening vocabulary and grammatical knowledge. Now, a pitfall to this, and this is something that I found, I've done 2 iterations of this. So this year, the students overwhelmingly wanted to read the nose. So we just finished that this particular week. And rather than, because the idea of literature circles is to have collaborative conversations, and sometimes that didn't happen in my class. It was more like a series of mini presentations rather than them actually engaging in collaboration and in collaborative dialogue, which I think part of it is proficiency level. They're not quite there yet, knowing how to like interrupt somebody to ask a question, or how to how to make connections to how to say some of these, so that pragmatic knowledge and like turn taking and those kinds of things. That's a little bit lacking at the end of second year, which is partly my fault. I could do a better job of developing those skills more before this kind of activity. And also the one recommendation that I would have would be to do these roles beforehand in small bits, so that they, leading up to, so in particular for this iteration this year, a few weeks back, about a month ago, I had everybody do the grammar detective role, and for another text, I had everybody do like the word wizard role, so they were able to get an idea of how to do that before doing it on a larger scale like this. So there's some of the references that I used, and I thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Very inspiring presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, Kristen, I agree. I see your comment in the chat. It is. I'm learning that even towards the end of second year, it's really, and especially over Zoom as well, and not all of them share their screens. It's thanks. Yeah, Alexandra.
I had a follow-up question also on that, because I do feel like, yes, this is one of our biggest struggles, no matter what the level. So I was wondering if I'm sure you've thought about it, and do you think, have you thought of any strategies to help overcome this inability to collaborate and react and all of that? Do you maybe now have any tricks?
Yeah, I've racked my brain, and I've done things like giving a list of common questions. Like if you want to ask a clarification question, this is how you ask it. If you want somebody to repeat something, you could do it. So having a list, and then throughout class, so some says, "Oh, I have a question," and I'm like, "You can say that in Russian, right?" So like, that can come on, and to try to make it a little more automatic, and that is one thing that helps a little bit, but also over Zoom, having those conversations, it's different having conversations over Zoom than it is in person as well. So I feel like my struggle with that is kind of compounded by that. So that's the one thing that I've done, was giving a list of common phrases, like typical phrases, and then trying to, throughout class, and any class conversation, having them incorporate them.
Do you mind sharing that list? I feel like we at
Sure,
ACTI
yeah.
would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
have
you.
to. Yeah, absolutely. I'll find it, and then I'll put it in the chat when.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wendy, I have a question. Can you please walk me through the, let's say, that process when волшебники слова share their knowledge with the rest of the group? Because
Yeah.
I kind of skeptical a little bit about the, let's say, like, not every student reads the text like accurately, yeah, with like
Right.
100% of
Yeah.
attention. So that's why what exactly wisdom?
Yeah. So I come in here a little bit, especially with this level, and sometimes the conversation goes to English, and sometimes I think at this level it's helpful. It's better to be accurate than to try to work through and have there be misunderstandings through the target language. So if волшебник слова say, okay, here's something like, okay, what it's a список слов, and they go through some of the words, and then they might even say, I found these translations, but I don't understand which one is more accurate. And then that's where, okay, let's look at the context. And then I might ask some of the other students if they have insights. So some students might have like a higher proficiency level. I have a few heritage learners that might have heard the word before or have it used in a particular context. So I have them share what if they have any insight there. But so I sometimes I'll walk them through, especially like grammatically or the volshebnik slova. I'll walk them through it a little bit. Oh, let's take a look at the text. Let's go back to the text and see. Let's see what words are surrounding this word. What words come with this word, and then okay, based on this context, this is probably a more accurate translation. Ideally, so the idea of literature circles is that the students do this themselves, but in the second year they just can't quite yet. So my role is probably a little bit stronger at this level than it might be in, say, a fourth year class. Does that help?
Yes, it helps a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you read pretty hard texts.
It is.
Authentic
Yeah.
text. That's why I'm
Yes.
asking.
Yes.
And here's my skepticism comes.
Yeah, it is. And they all say, "Oh, wow, this is really hard." I say, "Yeah, and it's okay that it's hard, and we're learning together. Like we're all learning together. We're all developing an understanding of the text together." And they seem to see that. And even one student after this past week, I said something like, "Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get through a text," and he said, "But doing it this way, we understand it on a deeper level, though, because I couldn't do this on my own. I couldn't get to this understanding on my own than if like someone else sharing their role from that perspective. We go deeper." And I was like, "Oh, good." That's exactly what I was hoping for.
Okay. Lauren?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you also teach Russian 1 at all? I can't remember if you've mentioned that.
Yeah, I have. I haven't the past couple of years, but yeah, I have taught both, but I'm mostly doing second year now.
Okay, because I was thinking like, how can I do this in my classroom? And I was imagining students doing it with like a headline, like a news headline, like the similar roles, but kind of like at a simpler level, so that they're not like looking at a whole page. So I think that could be a cool way to scale it up. So thank you for sharing this
That's a
idea.
great idea. Oh, I love that idea. Thank you.
And we have one question in the chat. How difficult is it to work this kind of project into already existing curriculum?
Yeah, I would say I don't have I create the curriculum. I'm very, very lucky that I can actually create, and I have the students create the curriculum with me. So at the beginning of each class in second year, I ask them, "What do y'all want to learn? Like, what kinds of things do you want to read? What kinds of activities do you want to do? What grammatical topics do you want to cover?" And we come up with a syllabus together. And so with an existing curriculum, if you already have a text identified, like a short story or a play, then that you could probably work a literature circle as the way to do that text in there. But that would be my initial thought on that.
Mm-hmm. The next question is about the text. So how do you choose, and like what are your suggestions on the length?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've learned is that the students coming up with the choice in the book or whatever to read can take them a long time. It can take them a long time to come to an agreement. So what I did this year, they had a list of like 6 or 7 texts that were all mentioned that they all thought, "Oh yeah, that sounds really cool." And then I had them do like a voting thing through Canvas, and I said, "List your top 3," and with fingers crossed that at least that the text would be within their top 3, and fortunately this year it was, so the no's came up. So selecting the excerpt for the Master Margarita, I gave them a list of possible excerpts of like scenes, and they chose they chose the scene there. And then for the no's this year, we just read the first part, and it took us 2 weeks to get through the first part, through part 1. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I think we can. Yeah, if we don't have any other questions, maybe Lauren, the next presentation is yours. So feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you. Okay. Let me just make sure I get I don't know where my chat went. There it is. All right. And then our videos are kind of covering up some of my words. Okay. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I teach Russian 1 to high school students in Chicago, and I'm approaching the idea of inclusivity from the idea of belonging. And so my goal in my class is to make it a place where students feel successful and then also where they feel represented. Oh, okay. So I'm going to focus first on successful. And how I approach success in my class for my students is through activities that build up their confidence and also humor, which is kind of the thing that just works with my teaching style. You might be familiar with the memes online about learning Russian. It makes it seem like an impossible task. So you can see like study Russian grammar underwater so no one can see you crying, or all these kind of things that make it feel like, why would I even give it a shot? This is kind of the opposite approach I take with my students. I actually don't think they even are aware that that Russian is a very hard language. I think I've tricked them. And so I think the reason for this is like when I was learning Russian and taking like Russian 101, I saw these sorry, I forgot the word I'm looking for, the case charts, and I was completely overwhelmed by them in the same way that someone taking like an intro math course for that top image there would be like, I have no idea what that is. So this is kind of what I go for in my class. I almost make it seem like exceedingly easy, like the 1+1 equivalent of Russian, and then like slowly build up student confidence so that they feel comfortable speaking a new language. Something that you might have heard about current high schoolers is that they don't even know English grammar. So how are we going to teach them Russian grammar? Has anyone heard that about students? And I think it's not too late to teach them. And something that I try and do is show them images like this. They can easily tell me like who's the subject in this little image here, and then what's the verb, and they can do it. They just aren't familiar with those terms. They need something to connect with it. So we started doing just a little bit of English grammar in order to understand Russian grammar. Here's a couple more images. Like we've got the subject of SpongeBob and the verb of dancing. Giraffe galloping. Do giraffes gallop? I'm not really sure. This is from our security camera at school. That's me. And then I tripped, and my students like this one because they can say, Miss Nelson tripped. And they're like, can I have that image or GIF? And then when we first start talking about accusative case, we think about direct objects, and we ask the question of like, who or what is getting verbed? And this image right here is the one that has been most successful at getting my students to immediately understand that this kitten is the direct object of Pikachu's pushing, or that the water is the direct object of Elmo's drinking, or that the tail is the direct object of the dog's wagging. So this is a student-facing slide that I would show them in class. I have them like figure out, okay, what's the pattern here? And I only stick with one of the rules at first, and they see that the ah is changing to oo. So I give them a moment to come up with the rule for it. So they end up figuring out when a Russian word ends with an ah and it's the direct object, you're going to change the ah to oo, and they apply it to the rest on there. And they're like, this is easy, Miss Nelson. So that's what I do with the accusative case. What does that say underneath the chat there? Okay, whoops. And then when we did prepositional case, I mentioned that I try and bring some humor in this. I have this like plastic blow up horse in my room, and that's him in the picture there. And he travels all around the world to go to different places for prepositional case. And he loves to go to the club in particular. And then so I give them like the very basic rule, like ah to ooh, or like we're going to put a yeah at the end of the word. And then when I do additional case rules, this might be kind of like psychologically manipulating, but I'll be like, all right, everyone, I've got good and bad news. Which one do you want first? And what do you think the students want first? Good or bad news?
Bad.
Yeah, they want the bad news. So I'm always like, the bad news is, you know how we've been changing these endings? Okay, well, there are even more ways to change the words. And then kids are like, well, what's the good news? And then I kind of, in a hammy way, I'm like, well, you've been so good at changing these that one more is not a problem. And then they're like, oh, but then they're like a little more open to adding it on because they've been like, okay, the other one, I can do it with no problem. And then so you can see the little horse here. his name is Rhodey. He goes all over the world. And like yesterday, we just did this and we had learned all these different endings for prepositional case. And I saw students, I have a 2-minute timer down there. I saw someone do this in like 15 seconds, like a kid who has like had his head down on the desk for like half the semester. He was like, this is really easy. So I don't know. I tricked him into learning prepositional case by building up his confidence. And just one more humorous thing I wanted to show is kind of adding goofy little things. I can now have students like tell me, oh, that's an unstressed O, it's going to sound like an ah, or like that O is stressed, so it's going to sound like an O. And we kind of turn them into little people. So an unstressed O is relaxing, and it's like, ah, I'm unstressed, and the stressed O is like, oh no. All right, and then I want to talk about making my class a place where students feel represented. And my school is unique in that 99% of my students are students of color, and they are from lots of different places in the world. The majority of my students are Spanish speakers, and they come from Mexico, Peru, Puerto Rico. A lot come from the United States, Ecuador, the Dominican Republic, Honduras, Venezuela, Guatemala, and 26% of my students are they're designated as multilingual learners, meaning that they are at different levels of learning English. So they're receiving like English language services while they're in high school to kind of get them up to speed on English. Like some of them are new arrivals, like they've come this year from their countries for the very first time, and now they're in my Russian class. And so that's something that I keep in mind a lot when teaching them. And then last night at the conference, I used the activity I'm about to talk about as an example of supporting students with disabilities. And I'm going to use the same activity to talk about culturally inclusive materials. And they overlap because those groups of students in my classes overlap. So this is something that we did pretty recently. We've been talking about food. And I asked my students to tell me at least 5 foods they love to eat, 1 drink that they love to drink. And I have a little circle around the Spanish over there because students can answer these questions in English or Spanish, because a lot of my Spanish speakers wouldn't be able to answer it in English because they're still learning English. And so they can write down in whatever language, just brainstorm some ideas of foods that they love. And I'm going to ask my Zoom audience, just, can you share some foods that you love to eat and drinks that you love to drink, either in the chat? You can also unmute, whatever you like. What do you love to eat? You can answer in English. You can answer in Spanish. Oh, pelmeni. Yeah. Nice. Do you make them yourself, or do you get the frozen ones and boil them? Same with
Whenever I'm very ambitious and I have time, my kids and I sit down and make them. But that happened like maybe twice.
Yeah.
They're mostly store-bought, unfortunately.
That's not unfortunate. It's
I love
easy.
that version.
Oh, bacon, hot chocolate, and coffee. That sounds like a nice combo. Nice. Pelmeni. Awesome. Thank you for sharing those. So that's what I get to do that in my class. And then I get to walk around the room. Oh, fresh bread. Do you make your fresh bread? That's okay too. So imagine like 30 students in the room all writing down their favorite things to eat, and I get to walk around and make connections with them. And so that's another way I try to build community in my classroom. So I can be like, oh, I like birria tacos too. Like, what's the best place to get birria in Chicago? And not all at once. And then recently I learned about a dish called morisqueta, which is from the Michoacan region of Mexico. And so this is a cool opportunity for me to learn about my students' lives as well. And they teach me new things all the time. And then I've also learned that students really love Wingstop. And the big question is whether you dip your wings in ranch or blue cheese. So I make sure to ask that. And regarding the morisqueta dish, I have a student on an app called Remind, which is a way you can like text students for like a field trip. And when we did the ACTR Olympiada, I made a big group for the students, and I messaged the student about that dish this morning. And I told him I was going to do this presentation, and I'm using morisqueta as his example, and I asked him whether he wanted to say anything to the audience. And you can see his response here, that he likes to express his cultures and implement it in Russian. So he's half Puerto Rican and half Mexican, and he, on his little food dish, he had the morisqueta, he had some different Puerto Rican foods, and some Wingstop. And I also wanted to give him a shout out because he got a gold at Olympiada. So I'm That's a shout out to Alex. So then after this, I give students this blank plate, and this is my example that I showed them. They're going to draw their foods and then label them in Russian. And this is the student facing slide again. They're going to draw the 5 foods and drink, and then I have them get their Chromebooks to do some translations and look up some words for the different foods. And they can see the example on the slide and how much time they have. Oh, and the background music while they work for this slide, it was from Animal Crossing, the video game. And I either do that or like Zelda music, or they really like this guy named Mac DeMarco. He has these really cool instrumental songs that are fun for like thinking. And that's another connection point because I could be like, oh, they're like, oh, this is Animal Crossing. And I'm like, yeah, what's your island called? And we can kind of connect over our video game connections. Here's some of the examples of what students produced. On the left one, you can see like a pretty cool intersection of like ramen and Mexican food and pambazo and horchata. On the right, I have a student who loves to make a joke about eating chimarashka. Oh, yeah, I know. Right next to some eggs and chicken nuggets. On this one, people added a little bit of color. You can see some tamales and pozole, different fruits. The student loves fruits. And then on this one, you can see some strawberry lemonade and chicken sandwich. And the step that they did after this is they were able to open their packets. So you can see these pages side by side, and they traded packets. And then they wrote responses to each other about their food. And they're like, oh, I also love to eat pizza, or I don't really like to eat apples. Oops, the chat's covering that note on there. Oh yeah, there are some sentence frames there to help students who need a little push of what to write. This is the student facing slide again. So this is it's broken up by each partner of how long they talk to people and write down their responses. And then you can see here, there's different handwriting because these are like the 5 people who responded to this student's food with his virgin mojito. So you can see different handwriting, which is cool to see. And then the final step of this, oh yeah, they have the chance to interact with each other and they can find similarities and differences. And the final step was that they wrote sentences about what they love to eat and drink, and then also added locations and why. And this is our first time like adding why to our desires. So they had some like structures they could use, but they could also kind of branch out. And I tried to find images of all the foods so you could focus on those and see the variety here of what they're bringing to the table. We got some cheeseburgers and strawberries and water. I thought this avocado picture was pretty cute of him eating an avocado. And then we have tacos and pizzas, pozole, chilaquiles at a very specific restaurant in Chicago. And strawberry lemonade, torta, burger. And you can also see the students' personalities come out in their sketches. The student has a very distinct sense of humor. Wings, more pozole. This student's from Peru. She has some ceviche, lomo saltado, and then she likes tea. And then in conclusion, which I think I'm just at about 13 minutes, I provide the structure of the activities for my students, and then they're providing the content that's relevant to their lives. And then this is something that they can, that's not the sentence I wanted to end with. Let me just pretend that I ended with relevant to their lives. That's the end of my slide there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Why am I always hungry after your roundtable? Seriously, it's the second conference. You're doing a really good job presenting.
Because we always talk about food in my class. That's a big uniter.
Any questions? Yeah, we have a question. Oh, okay.
Actually, a comment, not a question. I just wanted to say that I love this so much, and I'm so envious of your students because I always ask myself, how do I add more fun to the class without taking away from, you know, what we need to cover and what we need to practice, right? Because we're a flagship program. We have these like very, you know, insane standards, and how do we meet them? But what I love about what you're doing is that you're actually incorporating a lot of this fun into the grammar explanation and practice. So it's not just fun and games, but you're actually, you know, doing the work that needs to get done. So this is very inspiring. And like I said, I really want links to those memes and other stuff. It's they're amazing. Like, I don't know how you get the time to find such jewels, but I think they're amazing. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Yeah, as a high school teacher, I feel like I have to kind of lean into the performer mode a little more than I would if I was. But my students also don't choose my class. They like show up on the first day and they're like, "Am I supposed to be in a Russian class?" And I'm like, "Yeah, come on in."
Yeah, I like to make a comment too. I really appreciate as well how you allow for both English and Spanish as like tools and resources for the students, and that I think that is something that's very valuable. That rather than looking at it as an additive thing. Oh, and you know Spanish. This is great. We can use Spanish. You can use that to help with Russian. So that's I love that translanguaging approach. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Your class looks like so much fun.
Thanks.
It's
Not all
presentation.
students think
Yeah.
so, so I'm glad. Some kids are like, they stare at me and they're like,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know how lucky they are. They never do.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you're
don't
right.
take it personally.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you're gonna miss me. The Spanish thing is cool because there's often words they can understand that like my English speaking students can't, and they're like make a connection where there's some like far off French connection with Russian, and then they're like, oh, Spanish, French, Russian, and I'm like, oh, pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so Spanish is my third language, and I've noticed that Spanish has helped. Like Russian has helped with my Spanish in some way because some of the words are like the same, but maybe the stress is different. Like it's really, and there's some points of pronunciation that are similar too. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much for sharing.
thanks.
Mhm. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, we will move on to the last presentation. Can you see my slide? Okay, so initially, I plan to present with my beloved friend and colleague from Dickinson College, where I used to teach to, Alyssa DeBlasio. But unfortunately, she's not able to join us today. So I will be presenting my part and her part as well. So my focus will be on exploring disability within the context of a Russian language classroom. And I can. So often disability is associated with physical impairment, but we have to acknowledge that the term encompasses visible differences such as mobility challenges, and we see different photos in our textbook and teaching materials of people in wheelchairs or blind people, but also it encompasses invisible disabilities such as learning disabilities, emotional disorders, and as you see, different statistics here and data, the World Health Organization states that an estimated 1.3 billion people experience significant disability, and this represents 16% of the world's population, or 1 in 6 of us, and this number is increasing. According to the also there are different kinds of disability, and according to the most recent report of the Chronicle of Higher Education from 1978 to 2011, the proportion of undergraduate students with a disability increased by 4 times. By 2015, nearly 1 in 5 undergraduates and more than 1 in 10 graduate students reported having a disability. Disability, as we know, can happen to anyone, anywhere in the world at any time, and it's crucial to ensure that different forms of disability are visible and represented in the materials that we utilize in the classroom. So Alyssa and we started working and designing different modules for our advanced students that represent different people with disabilities, like maybe 5-6 years ago, and it turned into a chapter in the textbooks that we published in 2022 called Продвижение. And now we're kind of supplementing that chapter with different resources and explore and trying to go beyond that, assumption that disability is always a struggle. And if we discuss it, we always discuss it in that way. And kind of we, like over time, we just noticed that the constant focus on challenges can unintentionally problematize disability in classroom discussions, and creating it creates sometimes an impression that disability is always associated with, as I said, struggle or continuous fight for a so-called normal life. And we ground our approach in several theoretical perspectives: a theory of mind that emphasizes the capacity to understand others' thoughts and feelings, highlighting the importance of perspective talking in language learning. Also, this theory is connected to empathy that involves recognizing and understanding the emotions of others. And of course, critical disability theory that views disability not, I kind of mentioned it, but not merely as a medical condition, but as a complex cultural, historical, social, psychological, and political phenomenon. CDD aims to challenge negative perspectives of perceptions of disability that exist in society, and sometimes also presented in our teaching materials in the textbooks. In language pedagogy, we kind of summarized here in this slide that if we integrate characters with disabilities into instructional materials, it can provide meaningful opportunities for our students to engage with important questions. And also like such questions as, for instance, how can we foster communication that respects differences without emphasizing otherness, as I said, and how we can effectively navigate and resolve misunderstandings and also misinterpretations. And inclusive materials in language education can serve multiple purposes. As you see in this slide, it can challenge societal inequalities. It offers learners insights into the lives of individuals with disabilities, allows students to see reflections of themselves in the content, foster positive attitudes toward people with disabilities. It also stimulates transformative discussions about individuality and diversity, and again, returns us to empathy, which is very important, and the society in general and the classroom to foster inclusive and kind of a comfortable atmosphere for everyone. And as I said, we started with designing supplemental materials for the chapter. And in the chapter in Продвижение, we have the text about Boris Kustodiev. And if you don't know, this like most of his life, he was paralyzed, and you see one of the brightest and like one of the most famous paintings he made, and you see these bright colors, and that's what my students noticed right away when they read his about his life, that actually he made his most colorful and happy paintings while sitting in his room for a long time because he was paralyzed. And we try to include more stories about the artist, and we try to expand the the text of text that we offer our students, and include more information about like artists from post-Soviet area, but also we have text about like world about artists from different areas of the world, and a wealth of stories, fiction, films. So we kind of expanding the list of resources we can offer to our students. So if you have any resources that you would like to add to that list, we would appreciate it, because we try to bring very diverse backgrounds of the artists with different background. And you see that the focus of the assignment is not on the struggles or challenges that artist experienced during his life. It's mostly about different styles of art, and it's relevant for such courses as Russian through art or Russian culture through art and media. And these courses are very common for advanced students. And I usually create in Miro or Padlet online gallery with different artworks and give students a link. So they do it as a homework assignment. And after that, they come to the classroom and I try to print out in color the images of those paintings, and we walk around the classroom and discuss different paintings, including what they learned about the artist. So that's kind of connected to the project that we published in the textbook, but also recently I started including more resources, and I want to highlight this fantastic resource named The Art of Autism. It showcases and explains art by artists with autism, providing high quality images, very high quality images, and interviews with artists. So it can replace, sometimes we have an opportunity to have a guest in our classroom. And a couple years ago, I found a few neurodivergent students in our universities who actually spoke Russian. So I was able to invite them. So, but if we don't have such opportunities, we can easily bring such resources with interviews and authentic materials. There are some interviews that are doubled in English, but the artists are Russian-speaking people. Also, so I would like to talk a little bit about people first language, because it's very important when my students, if we invite someone to the classroom, I also draw their attention to the language that those people use, because they need to learn about more respectful method to reference individuals with disabilities, because if they read, I don't know, a law document or something, they see one language, and when they read about the artist with autism, they see a very different language in Russian. And so we talk about word order. The individual is referenced first, followed by his or her disability. We talk about current terminology and the changes that we should recognize that acceptable phrases can shift in connotation over time as terminology evolves, like человек с ограниченными возможностями и человек с инвалидностью versus человек с инвалидностью, for instance. Yeah, so I usually use this resource. I think it's a very well-known resource, Такие дела. And actually, for the project that I will show next, we use this resource a lot because, I don't know, a couple years ago, they launched their Instagram channel and they share different authentic interviews or like fragments of interviews with people who identify themselves as, I don't know, neurodivergent person, or they kind of those short videos serve as an illustration for this resource. And I would like to finish with some ideas for the project that you can do. I actually tried to do some of this project with my intermediate students. It also works. So for instance, accessible tourism guide, it's possible to do not only with advanced students when they design a travel guide in Russian, highlighting accessible destinations. Again, they assess their own campus, for instance, or a school where they study. And sometimes it's like amazing how they bring different stories and they can narrate in Russian. So it's not necessarily about people with disabilities, but for instance, their friend broke a leg and wasn't able to get to the building where the classes were because of the limited accessibility. Sorry, what did I do? Okay. Social media exploration, as I said, we worked with Instagram and Telegram, so different activists, channels, organizations, and each student presents a brief overview of selected profile. They describe the type of content. They and again with the focus on first language, use analysis. They reflect. So it's mostly for advanced students when they can compare the language and also the resources and the representation of different people in various media resources, and they summarize key points, identify vocabulary related to the topic, discuss cultural attitudes. But it's what I do with mixed classrooms where I have heritage language learners and L2 students, or with advanced students like fourth year undergraduate students. Also, my students love this project when they analyze Russian language public service announcements, and we did it for the chapters about racism in Russia. And they, like, of course, it's like what you don't really enjoy reading, but analyzing it and what that they really understand this content, it impresses them a lot. And they examine linguistic strategies and cultural nuances. And so we had the projects where they had to examine different commercial images about resources for people with disabilities, and they saw whether how those people were represented. And yeah, that's and infographic creation. I think many of us use it. So that's it. And okay, the last thing I wanted to bring, because when I all the time check like if we have any new resources to bring to the classroom. And recently I found a resource that offers such activity. So one student in each group will play a part of someone with autism. So the other 4 people each have different jobs. So you see, and that's what I don't think works as an inclusive assignment. That's why I wanted to show it. And I discussed it with my students, and really no one in my classroom appreciated this activity, because I found it, I thought, okay, maybe I'm different, maybe I belong to a different generation, maybe I came from a different country, so I will discuss it with my students if they really find it useful for them to work on as a project. And nobody appreciated it. So I think we should assess and evaluate activities that are published even in different resources for like not only language students, and see if they aim to achieve the goal that you want to achieve as an educator. That's it. Thank you. Sorry, very chaotic as usual. If you have any questions or comments.
I love the art project. I thought that was really that was a really interesting project, and I'm curious about and maybe you mentioned it and I missed it, some of the student experience of that particular project. Like what kind of feedback did they give you of what they learned, and what stood out to you for their experience with that project?
Mm-hmm. Well, the insights that I shared, so I mostly shared what my students bring and reflect. So at the end of each chapter, we have a time for reflection. And this year, so in the fall, I will try to invite an artist to the classroom to do that reflection part. As an art class, yeah. So it's just for 75 minutes meeting with an artist to produce something as a reflection after like 2 or 3 weeks working on that chapter. But I was mostly focused on artists. Now I try to write text about musicians, because I noticed like huge interest of my students in a chapter about music. So I think that's what we would need to do. And before, yes, artists, of course, obviously they try to analyze after they learn about disability or challenges that the person experienced. So they try to see if it influences had impact on the art production of that artist, and they don't really see it. So they never say like, oh, that was obvious that the person had disability, very hard life, closed the door, sitting in darkness and painting. That what impresses me, because that's exactly what we reproduce in the classrooms when we try to talk about disability as a problem. Because everyone, when we start talking about it, they immediately notice that it's not a problem. It's like you live with something, yeah? You're a person with disability. It doesn't really mean that you look at this life and you see everything in dark shades. But yeah, as I said, so we're expanding the list. If you have any resources, please share. And also, it's been maybe 2.5 years since I decided to write something about it, like an article, turn it into an article, and I still do not have time for it. So maybe if you want to do it with me, or maybe with us, Alyssa will join, I think probably too. So yeah, please reach out to us because we're lazy to do it. It's into an article. Okay, we have 1 minute left. I didn't expect that. Thoughts?
I just had a quick question. How are you planning on organizing the artists? Are they going to be English speaking? Is that
No,
someone from
Russian
your
speaking.
university?
No, Russian speaking.
You
No,
won't?
no English speaking people in my classroom.
Okay. So how would you get a Russian speaking artist into your classroom, or is it going to be virtual?
No, I hope to invite someone from the community. So I will use the opportunity. So what I recently do, I post everything in Russian moms DMV area, very progressive group. So if you have children, join the Russian speaking group of mothers. You will find someone there. And they all the time organize holidays or activity events for kids. And there are different artists in the area. So now I need to choose actually who I want to bring to the classroom. Yeah, I'm that privileged to live here.
Sounds great.
And people want to do it. I even requested, I applied for a grant and requested some money from the university and started talking to people from the community who answered my call. And they want to do it for free. They're willing to come to the classroom, share, and the only thing that they ask to buy different tools. I don't know, like what we decide to do eventually. Maybe will be something outside, maybe not in the classroom. I don't know. We will not be able to use projectors if they want to show something. Not sure about that, so we're working on it now. But in the fall, that's my plan, to bring one artist and one musician to my classroom. Yes.
Tell us more, Datsu. How that goes.
Sure, I will.
Um,
Do we have any questions? No? Can
Wendy, thank you so much for posting the phrases.
Yeah, it's for first year, and then I build from there.
Okay. So I don't know if we don't have any questions, we probably can leave the session. Sasha, please help me. I don't know. It's the first session I'm chairing.
Yep, we can. First of all, let's stop the recording.
Okay, thank you.